We're back, we're talking some FF7, we're talking some Rebirth, and we're here to cover some random bits of info that we maybe didn't talk about the other day when we did our kind of like info roundup video, and kind of any other news that might have happened since then. With Rebirth on PC, it's breaking records for single-player Final Fantasy games on Steam. It has had the most concurrent players for a single-player Final Fantasy. Obviously, it doesn't compare to something like Final Fantasy XIV, which is in a realm of its own. A realm reborn, one might say. So this is my screenshot I took right now as I'm recording. The game has peaked at 40,564 players, and even right now has almost 26,000 people playing it. Now, obviously, 40,000 peak player count isn't like a ton in comparison to a lot of other games out there, but for the Final Fantasy franchise, and in comparison to other recent releases like 7 Remake and Final Fantasy 16, it's a pretty significant jump. Starting with the more recent Final Fantasy 16, this had a peak player count of 27,508. So Rebirth has, about 13,000 more peak player count. Final Fantasy 16 and, the 7 Remake / Rebirth are completely different kind of fan bases and different kinds of games in a lot of ways. They're both action RPGs, obviously, but one leans a lot heavier into that, right? So the comparison is not really a surprise given that, the Final Fantasy VII IP is very, very popular. But what's actually pretty interesting is comparing Rebirth to 7 Remake Intergrade on PC. I was kind of surprised to see this, but Remake Intergrade only peaked at 13,803 players, which gives Rebirth like 3 times the peak player count. In the defense of Remake Intergrade on Steam, it took like more than 2 years to come to the platform, right? It took like a year and a half, like to the end of 2021, to come to Epic, and then it took till the summer of 2022 to eventually reach Steam, right? So it took a long time. It's not really surprised that there wasn't like this overwhelming success on the platform, because by that time it's like, who gives a fuck? You could have already played it on Epic half a year ago. Of course, with Rebirth, it's coming to Steam in less than a year. So it's like, it's not really a fair comparison. Again, I'll always say this, Rebirth is a better game than Remake, so that could be also part of the success of it on Steam. But because of the time frames of the two games, it's not really a fair comparison, if that makes any sense. I think a more fair comparison is Final Fantasy 16, so it's really interesting to see how much more successful it seems that 7 Rebirth is compared to 16. I know Rebirth is a very new game on PC. It's not even a week old at this point, but it's kind of interesting to see the player count right now, at least with the screenshot I took, is damn near the same as the peak player count of Final Fantasy 16. But all in all, this is pretty good news for the Remake trilogy, but also the franchise itself, because we've only seen an uptick from, 7 Remake to 16 to 7 Rebirth. It went from 13,000 peak player count, 27,000, and then 40,000, right? Like, does this mean Remake Part 3 or the eventual Final Fantasy 17 will break 40,000 concurrent players? That remains to be seen. I think at least with the Remake Part 3, it's possible, as long as they follow the Rebirth model of how, the game developed. Like, just give us Rebirth, but bigger and better, right? I think it's definitely possible. And also it comes down to release windows. Do you got to wait another almost year for it to come to Steam, come to PC, or is it going to be closer to release, or is it going to be day one on PC? Actually, speaking of Remake Part 3 potentially being a day one on PC, we do have an interesting quote from Hamaguchi from a few days ago. FF7 Rebirth director Naoki Hamaguchi says he personally thinks it is inevitable that the console and PC versions of Square Enix games will be released at the same time or very close together. It is also a reality that the world is no longer in an era where limiting the platform on which a game is played to specific hardware means only the benefits are great. We also realize that through this remake project, and the company has announced that it is shifting towards multi-platform development. Future new IP will be developed along those lines, so personally I guess that the trend to release the console and PC versions at the same time, or both released extremely close to each other, is inevitable. So this is something we've discussed quite a few times on the channel, but if you look to the recent releases, at least with the Final Fantasy series, with 7 Remake, and then 16, and then 7 Rebirth, their exclusivity windows on PlayStation have gotten shorter each and every time. Even if the actual time frames have never mattered, it's never like the exclusive ends and then it just comes to PC the next day or whatever. They've never really mattered. Also, each of those games have come to PC faster, right? Remake took like a year and 8 months to come to Epic, a little over 2 years to come to Steam. 16 took a little over a year to come to PC, and then now obviously Rebirth is coming to PC in less than a year. So I think it's pretty much a lock. The Remake Part 3 will come to PC faster than Rebirth. It's just a matter of how much faster. According to Hamaguchi, it could be day one release on PC, or it could be very close to that. As of a few days ago, Rebirth did debut on PC at a 91 on Metacritic, but it has dropped a bit since then. It was previously at 91 with 4 reviews. It's now sitting at an 89 with 36 reviews. 89 is still pretty good for the Final Fantasy franchise. It might drop more as time goes on. I'm not entirely sure. I know I've seen a little bit of bad stuff about the PC version. I don't know entirely everything, but I have seen people talk about crashing issues, and I know Steam Deck has some problems too. I remember back whenever Remake first dropped on PC, it definitely had a lot of problems too. So it seems to be like maybe a Square Enix problem, like the optimization for their PC version of games isn't the best. I don't know how bad Rebirth is in comparison to Remake on PC, but I've just seen a little bit of something about crashing issues and shit. I did also come across this post on Reddit talking about some game-breaking issues. It says getting soft locked during cutscene, game elements won't initiate like combat, dialogue, chocobo won't come when called, and other weird things. Low-res textures indicating that the game is now soft-locked. Also, same thing when opening the map and seeing nothing but icons. Opening a menu will cause a black screen. It's basically soft-lock the game. You can't control your characters. Invisible walls are nowhere, even the same place you just came from during exploration. Fast forwarding a cutscene or skipping it can lead to a soft lock. I'm not really going to go down the rabbit hole of all this because I'm sure there's a bunch of other things out there if you go on like these Steam links and stuff. I'll link to everything in the description below if you want to like research it and look into it yourself. But it does seem like there's more than just the initial kind of like game crashing issues that I had first seen. It's definitely something you guys can fill me in on if you're playing on PC. If you've been playing Rebirth the last handful of days or whatever, how's it been performing for you? Continuing with the PC-related discussion, we have Hamaguchi once again talking about mods, but wanted to clarify that he wasn't telling people in a previous interview that we looked at to not use mods at all, just to, not use the inappropriate ones. Rebirth director Nick Hamaguchi says that as someone who plays games on PC, he sometimes uses mods himself. He says he wasn't trying to tell people not to use mods in an earlier interview, is more about being mindful. He acknowledged the variety of mods available, from UI customizations to extreme costume changes or reverse engineering. He says he respects the modding community, as mods have played a significant role in the rise of the PC market, such as Fallout or The Elder Scrolls. Hamaguchi also notes that voluntary communities often move faster than the companies that produce the source material, which creates an exciting atmosphere. He thinks it's a fascinating market. We didn't necessarily have to read that because with the previous interview we looked at where Hamaguchi talked about mods, he never insinuated in that interview that you shouldn't use mods at all. I think he verbatim said inappropriate mods or something along those lines. Maybe there's some people that took that in the route of, no mods at all, but I mean, that's not at all what he said. But as you can see, Hamaguchi is a fan of mods in general. He just doesn't want you to do, nude mods and shit for characters. But unfortunately, that's going to happen. It's always going to happen. It's never not going to happen. And saying it out loud, telling people not to do it, it's just going to make it happen more, even though it's already going to happen anyways. Also, since we're talking about the PC stuff in regards to Rebirth, we might as well mention it. The game got cracked, I think, very quickly on Fairflight. And it's like, it's out there, If you're somebody that pirates games, you're going to come across this anyways. It's not like I'm bringing new information to anybody realistically. But it's out there. Got, I think, cracked according to Reddit in 24 minutes or something. I'm not necessarily going to be the one to tell you how to experience video games. I mean, you're going to do whatever the fuck you want to do anyways, right? But I will recommend supporting Square Enix and supporting the Remake project. I mean, it's very cheap on Steam to get Rebirth and even Remake and Rebirth together. It's not a lot of money. And obviously, this goes to help the Final Fantasy series and Square Enix and the Remake project itself, things like that. I feel like we need to cover that a bit just because it was some pretty big news over the last couple days since we last did a news video. Actually kind of it. I thought there was more to look at today. I thought there was other aspects of the recent interviews that we didn't talk about the other day, but kind of scrolling through the feeds, there's really nothing. I didn't really plan on it being an all kind of PC related video, but it's kind of nice because we don't really talk about the PC stuff too much anyways. Anyways, that'll be the video. Of course, pass off to you guys. What are your thoughts on the PC release of Rebirth so far? Again, if you're playing it the last couple days, how has your experience been? Has it been problematic? Have you been crashing, game-breaking bugs, things like that? If you're playing on Steam Deck, how's that been going? Because I've seen, different things about that. Video, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Search in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain or leave it like Cobain.